Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and good morning. You're gonna love this one. Whitney Webb, who obviously is in another time zone, has granted me a very gracious morning interview where we are going to go in depth on her latest expose via Epstein, via Gates, via Microsoft, via the entire Maxwell family and their connections not only to big tech, but big military lobbies, especially on behalf of Israel, but also the World Economic Forum. That keeps popping up in this article as well. So there's a lot to cover because the media has now acknowledged this relationship. They've kind of given you this limited hangout, something you're not going to see on unlimitedhangout.com, by the way, of this mad wife who didn't like this Epstein relationship. But we can obviously see it supersedes that. This relationship was well before what the media reports, I believe, in 2011. We're going to get her take on what this divorce really is all about and much more. But first, Whitney Webb, how's it going? Where can people check this out and everything else you've been up to? Because we know you're a workhorse. We know you got a book coming, but we want Whitney Webb content all the time. So where can we get it?
Well, so if you've been keeping up with my stuff or following, my Rockfin or where I've been putting out updates on my mailing list in case you're not on Rockfin, I had a really crazy year this year. Chile, where I lived for almost 7 years and where my daughter was born and everything, got totally insane and I had to leave at the last minute. And it's a total nightmare there even still. They just launched their vaccine passport for domestic use. They call it a mobility pass. And they openly say that it will grant you greater individual liberties if you get it. And of course, you can only get it at 14 days after your second vaccine dose. And it will actually allow you outside without police permission and papers by the police. I don't know if we talked about this, Jason, because it's been a while since I've been on, but the situation in Chile was basically if they declare quarantine in your area, which is totally arbitrary, it can last for months at a time. You're not allowed out of your house unless you have police permission. You're only allowed out twice a week for 2 hours a pop. I think a couple months ago, they extended it slightly just because people were getting antsy about it. But, basically they're like, oh, you want to be able to leave home imprisonment, get the vaccine is how they've set it up. And I think Chile, after Israel, is the only other country that uses currently vaccine passport for domestic stuff. Chile's launched on Wednesday, so the writing on the wall was there for the COVID stuff, and it was really hard. I couldn't get childcare in that situation, obviously, so it was really nuts. Beyond that, the region I was living in Chile is about to declare a war on domestic terror against the entire indigenous population, the Mapuches in Chile. I would argue that's because of they want to gut indigenous land laws there because they've discovered a lot of minerals, including gold and copper and other things in the mountains in that region. And a lot of those areas are owned by the Mapuches, who are like the native Chileans. And under existing law, even if a Mapuche wants to sell that property to a mining corporation, they legally can't. They can only sell that land to other Mapuches. So the way to get around that is to suspend the Constitution, declare martial law, which they've been talking about since last year doing in that region. And, my kid is like an eighth Mapuche and stuff. A bunch of my neighbors were, Mapuches as well. And it just was not a comfortable situation to be in, two things at once. So I didn't really have a lot of other options to go on. So I'm currently in Wales in the United Kingdom because, I don't really have a network in the US. Most people I know in the US are spread in like a variety of different states all over the place. I had a better local setup, I guess, in the UK through my partner. So that's basically why I'm here. I'm certainly not here for the federal government, but it's a better situation day to day than Chile was. At least I can, send my kid to daycare and she can be around kids her own age for the first time in a year. It's really criminal what they've done to kids. And the amount of like today in a UK newspaper here, the tiniest box ever on the 30th page in, they talk about how 2/3 of all mental health centers can't meet demand here because so many children are coming in because they're suicidal. It's just nuts. And the front page story was about how some rich lady had her $40,000 engagement ring stolen from her mansion. So apparently, mass kid suicide, suicidal epidemic doesn't make the news, but that shit does. It's really nuts. So anyway, to answer your other question, sorry about that for people that haven't been keeping up with my stuff and wondering maybe why I haven't had so much content this year. A lot has happened. And then I got really sick because I'm going to have my second kid in December and had super severe morning sickness and couldn't eat for like 2 weeks, but now I'm better. So,
well, you know what? Let's talk about a couple of those points really quick, because number one, when we were talking about Operation Warp Speed and especially vaccine passports after the fact, what was in these things, how it was a mobilization of a military program, YouTube recently took that video down from 7 months ago with you, and they gave me medical misinformation on that one, but they didn't give me a strike, right? And it is bizarre when you talk about these suicide wards filled with children. Today, I guess it's yesterday now, I was at a meeting where I've been meeting these like-minded folks. We were talking about these meetings beforehand. And one of the women there, works in a hospital, and she goes, the wings have 8 and 9-year-old children that are suicidal because of what's going on. And what they've done to children is beyond criminal. What they continue to do throughout the globe, even in westernized nations, is criminal, especially in Canada. I'm not sure if you've seen those videos, but the video of ice cream trucks that are now set up so you get a free ice cream, 12 years old or older, and you don't need your parents' permission to get a shot, and it's being protected by police there, is complete and total insanity. Yeah. It's beyond parody at this point. But now you're in the UK. There are still a lot of restrictions there. I guess before we get into Epstein.
Yeah, but the lockdowns here, you're allowed out of your house. It's just the stores are closed. In Chile, they're like, papers, please, and you get arrested if you don't have your police-issued paper. And where I was leaving, starting in December, it started to be not police, but the military enforcing this stuff. And I couldn't even leave my town to go to the next town over, where most of the stores are, because I was living in a pretty rurally, small touristic town, which obviously no tourism anymore over there. But, I couldn't even travel down the road without having to go through a military checkpoint. I mean, it's next level. And it's just nuts. There's a lot of really not good things going on in Chile right now, like the president. They're going to lose elections, most likely the current party in November. There's a lot of fuckery just happening all along the Andes right now. I would argue a lot of it has to do with mining, because they're basically the proxy wars of the past and the election manipulations of the past, where it was all about fossil fuel resources and oil. Today, it's about fourth industrial revolution, raw materials, specifically rare earth minerals, lithium, nickel, and all of that stuff. Going on right now in a big way. And obviously the Andes is full of that. And that's why you've had like 7 African leaders either mysteriously die or be couped in the past year. Where have I've seen no one really cover that. I covered it a little bit when I wrote about the Tanzania situation. But it's totally nuts. But basically, the president of Chile is very firm that he wants Santiago de Chile, which is like the capital, to be Latin America's first smart city, and is trying to remake the country into the lobby Amazon so that they can be the Southern Cone data center of Amazon's global business empire.
It's so odd that when you have like these like really authoritarian leaders, they're always like smart city, Cuomo being one of these people. It's so weird. And I guess we'll get there, but that'll kind of bring us into this article, because some of the connections that you have with these various people, you find them in positions of the World Economic Forum. And they are the big pushers of this fourth industrial revolution, this, in my opinion, transhumanist agenda that supersedes any one government that people really aren't aware of. And they use the United Nations in particular through their various sub-agencies, whether it's the World Health Organization now that we're seeing, or others, as
UNESCO is a big one.
As an avenue to not only propagate their message, but form it into a reality of different networks and contracts that, again, supersede the constitutions and governments of these various nations?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people, some people roll their eyes or whatever when they hear World Economic Forum now that haven't been paying attention, but I don't think they fundamentally understand what the World Economic Forum is, or that, who its partners are. The big Silicon Valley companies, Microsoft, IBM, all of these guys are part of that. And you have top oligarchs being involved, the whole Davos crowd. And as I point out in this article on Epstein and Gates, the biggest people in tech that have ties to this whole intelligence network are, a lot of them are intimately involved in the World Economic Forum. And one of them, who, in my opinion, is an obvious intelligence asset recruited by Epstein, who's very similar to Nicole Junkerman. I know Johnny Vedmore's been on your show to talk about her and her connections to all of this. Melanie Walker, she's co-chair of the Global Futures Council for the World Economic Forum. And in 2016, way before COVID and all of this stuff, she was harping on brain machine interfaces are the future. It's the future of medicine, gene editing, robots in your bloodstream that do surgeries remotely and all of this stuff. And she was Epstein's science advisor and then Bill Gates' science advisor, among other things. But I mean, she was recruited by Epstein back in 1992, offered a Victoria's Secret modeling job. There's no evidence she ever took the modeling job, because I've never seen any modeling shots of Victoria's Secret for her that have been dug up or made available. So no one really knows if that actually happened, but she did live in Epstein-owned residences in New York associated with his sex trafficking operation. It's not clear how long she was there. It's very possible that between then and when she graduated medical school in 1998, some of her education may have been financed by Epstein. And I say that just because of the pattern of Epstein doing that with other women and girls that were recruited into his network, offering to pay for their education, among other things, if they worked for him. She graduates from medical school, becomes a science advisor for 18 months, and then gets very cozy with Prince Andrew. And around the same time, Prince Andrew at Zorro Ranch, Epstein wasn't there, but he was given this is according to Epstein's former housekeeper there, given a beautiful neurosurgeon. There's only one neurosurgeon that was young at the time in Epstein's entourage, and that was Melanie Walker. And she apparently asked what types of teas would make Prince Andrew horny, and all of this stuff, and entertained him, whatever that means, for 3 days. And then about a year or so later, she ends up meeting Steven Sinofsky, then a top Microsoft executive, and moving in with him. Was she given to Sinofsky? Well, if you look at, the other connections of Epstein to all these top Microsoft executives, which I lay out in the article, it's pretty clear that, beyond the ties with Bill Gates and Paul Allen to Isabel Maxwell in this Evening Standard article that talks about Bill Gates helping Epstein make all of his money in the 90s, which are scandalous in and of themselves. You have top people at Microsoft, like their chief technology officer, their vice president for research, and Sinofsky, who actually developed Windows 8 and did Microsoft Office products for a long time, being compromised by an intelligence asset. In an intelligence network like Epstein. This isn't just a scandal for Bill Gates. This is a scandal for Microsoft, especially when you consider the Isabel Maxwell connection and how she and her sister Christine intimately involved. Well, Christine at the time when this was going on had co-founded Gilead at this point with the then CIA Chief Information Officer Alan Wade, which became the top Homeland Security software after 9/11. And Alan Wade later became intimately involved in the rise of Palantir. But at the same time, Isabel Maxwell, her twin sister, was the president of Comtech, which is an obvious Israeli intelligence front company. They wanted Isabel specifically because she was her father's daughter, father of Israeli super spy Robert Maxwell, who did the Promise software scandal. And what a lot of people don't know is that both Christine and Isabel were involved in the Promise software scandal. They worked for Information on Demand, which was the front company set up by their father, Robert Maxwell, that sold backdoored Promise software to U.S. national laboratories so that Israel could spy on U.S. nuclear research. So they were already involved in a scandal with their father, and then recruited to do the same by a faction of the CIA that works with Mossad pretty regularly, or Israeli intelligence pretty regularly. The other one goes to Israeli intelligence. Isabel Maxwell at this company, Comtech, has obvious ties to Bill Gates and Paul Allen that I document in the article. And we can go over those specifics if you want, but I want to pause. So
yeah, well, let's let's go over some of that, because one of the reasons, when people hear front company, what they don't understand, because they haven't read the article, is one of the telltale signs of these front companies is they never make any money. They never make any money. Yes.
They had the year before, Paul Allen and Bill Gates dumped a bunch of money into Comtech for no reason. Comtech turned no profit and had $4 million in losses just the year before. They'd never turned a profit. They were founded in 1991, and this was the end of the 90s when they invested in it. And by the way, Comtech, they're the people that gave them money to set up their company. It's run by, it was founded by ex-IDF guys. It was through the Yasma program, the first venture capital fund set up by the Israeli government, Yasma program, called, I think, Gemini Ventures or Gemini Israel Ventures, something like that. And the guy that Israel's government put in charge of that is this guy named Ed Mavlavsky, who was tied to the Jonathan Pollard scandal.
And for anybody that doesn't know,
the other biggest espionage scandal of the 80s in Israel against the U.S., you have Promise and Pollard, both tied to this one company, and they talk about over and over again how they wanted Isabel Maxwell because she's her father's daughter and she's just like her father. And Isabel openly says that her becoming president of Comtech was a chance to continue her father's legacy with Israel.
Yes,
is the direct quote.
Yes,
I mean, it couldn't be more blatant. I mean, seriously. And
right in your face. Well, let's talk about all this stuff, because people don't necessarily know what Promise is. So, Promise was this, software that had originated in government, been stolen, but then was being sold off. That was this ultra surveillance tool, again, back in the 90s, preceding a lot of the hacking tools that we have today, backdoors, malware. This precedes a lot of the internet that we now see. These were tools to get into regular telecommunications. Their father, Robert Maxwell, at the same time, is a media magnate. He's literally, his front is that he is a media mogul, but then he's working with Israeli intelligence.
But he sells software too, and that was part of the deal of this, that he would be the front man because of his ties. Because it's important to point out, while a media mogul, he was mainly focused in scientific publishing, which is pretty interesting when you later consider the involvement of John Brockman and Jeffrey Epstein, who in a lot of ways is kind of the successor to Robert Maxwell and allegedly was recruited by Robert Maxwell.
So, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the science aspect, right? Let's talk about, because one of the big aspects about this is Zorro Ranch, which has never really been looked at. And this idea
never rated. It's so nuts
in the desert, and that's despite having its own little villages for people like the Clintons and others. Despite all this documentation of you having Microsoft executives and many others coming there, but then the really odd story is the Epstein baby farm. And I was never really sure what to exactly make of that. Was Epstein trying to clone little baby Epsteins? Or was there some kind of a surrogate program being run there?
There was something going on. Yeah, there was something going on. If you remember back, I don't know if Maria Farmer talked about this when she came on your show, but when I spoke with her the first time, she talked about how at Zorro Ranch, Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were talking about setting up a surgery center at Zorro Ranch. And she was like, a surgery center? Why? And then she talked about later how Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein pressured her to have a breast reduction so she'd look more like a child, like a prepubescent child. So they were pressuring people to get unnecessary surgeries, setting this thing up there. And if you look at some of the scientists they're tied to, like George Church, who also is backed, some of his companies are backed by Gates, and Boris Nikolic, who's tied to both Gates and Epstein. George Church, besides being even called by mainstream media a eugenicist, has been an advocate for very disturbing forms of human experimentation, specifically like implanting resurrected Neanderthal embryos into women and making them give birth to like these weird gene-edited Neanderthal babies. I wonder why Zorro Ranch has never been rated. I think maybe that type of center there, or whatever it was, I definitely don't think they want that to come out.
Well,
because a lot of these scientists with Epstein that were funded by Epstein and tied to him, and including the ones that are known to be child rapists and people tied up with them, have never faced any accountability. I mean, one of the ones that should have was Marvin Minsky, but he was dead before the second arrest, so he couldn't really be held accountable. Since he was already dead. But a lot of people that worked with Minsky and stuff definitely should be looked at. And what's really crazy too is that a lot of these really the creepier guys in the science orbit, in technology orbit of Epstein, specifically the people that came out of Marvin Minsky's thinking machines in the 80s, including Danny Hillis. Thinking Machines was trying to build super AI computers for DARPA, and were DARPA contractors and all of this stuff in the 80s. They later get brought in by this guy named Bran Farron, who's running the Imagineering department at Disney and setting up all this stuff at Disney. He brings in Marvin Minsky, child rapist, Danny Hillis, creepy guy. Also, we can go into him later. But Bran Farron is best friends with this guy named Nathan Myhrvold, who at the time was also involved in some of this stuff. Nathan Myhrvold, I write about in the article, because he was chief technology officer of Microsoft. The year he becomes CTO of Microsoft, he goes on Epstein's plane twice. There he's hanging out with Dershowitz, GM on the flight logs, which we assume is, Ghislaine Maxwell. And then a couple years later, it's actually not just Virginia Giuffre, but also Alan Dershowitz, who says Nathan Myhrvold was a child rapist.
Yeah.
So you're having Alan Dershowitz, who's been accused of the same, and says, no, I kept my underwear on, saying, yeah, but that guy's definitely a child rapist. And nothing happened to this guy. And Nathan Myhrvold left Microsoft in 2000. He set up a venture capital fund called Intellectual Ventures. Epstein was bringing young women there, young girls, who were allegedly Russian models. And a couple years before, in 1998, Epstein goes with Nathan Myhrvold as part of a delegation for Microsoft Russia to Russia to study science advances in science or whatever. And I found these pictures of Epstein in a classroom full of teens there, and some other weird pictures, like this little boy alone with Epstein and I guess Esther Dyson, who's supposed to be one of the most powerful women in tech, who's on the board of 23andMe, has a bunch of ties to Google, and also the whole Edge crowd, alone with this little kid in the room. I mean, it's just creepy stuff. So why has no one looked into why Epstein was at the Microsoft Russia conference, in his relationship with Nathan Myhrvold, and all of this stuff? Myhrvold's never been held accountable. Pretty wild. So I don't know if you want to comment on that. Well,
yeah, before we even go further than that, like to just go back to Zorro Ranch, I think one of the things that we have to point out is that you have Bill Richardson, who's the governor of New Mexico, going there, also being accused of pedophilia multiple times in the public documents, who's never faced any kind of, I've never even seen him asked about it in the media, more than maybe once for him to deny it. There's no coverage there. And it's at a time where it seems like a lot of these business dealings are going on. And of course, he is one of these big advocates for globalism, sitting on a bunch of these different boards as well, Richardson. Now, as far as the article goes, and you getting into these trips with these people, you're talking about things, again, that supersede the 2011 trip, right?
Absolutely. This is all well before 2011.
Well
before
before 2011.
That Gates and Epstein didn't know each other until 2011 is a total crock of shit. Sorry to swear, but I mean, it's like, it's ridiculous. I mean, even, I've laid out this stuff already. One thing I haven't really dwelled on, this Evening Standard article from January 22nd, 2001, never retracted, but scrubbed on the internet before his second arrest, probably disappeared around the time of his first arrest. I'm speculating on that, but it seems more likely because it mentions his intelligence ties directly, that Epstein claimed to work for intelligence, but now denies it. Okay. Yeah, that doesn't look good for them, but it also makes it really clear that Prince Andrew was guilty as hell.
Yeah.
That article. Yeah. So that may be another reason as well. But in there it says Epstein made his millions with three men. And of course, the first two are Leslie Wexner and Donald Trump, who we know had ties with Epstein that go back to the 1980s. And it's very likely that Trump and Epstein did have a lot of business stuff together, because before 2000, in most media reports, Epstein is referred to as a property developer and was intimately involved in the work of the world of New York real estate. And he, Tom Barrack of Colony Capital, who stayed close to Trump through his presidency, and Trump were seen together all the time at nightclubs in the 1980s, and all of this stuff, and obviously had connections and likely did business together. And in that period in the 80s as well, Wexner himself was very involved in real estate stuff. And obviously the ties between Epstein and Wexner's money, we all know. But the third person in that list, after two top close people who were known to be close to Epstein, is Bill Gates. And to include Bill Gates in that list, Wexner, Trump, and Gates, obviously there had to have been some significant ties, because that article was never retracted. It was never challenged by Gates at the time. Obviously, Epstein wasn't notorious in 2001 at the time of its publication.
And I think it's important.
If that was false, why didn't they, say anything about it? I mean, the Evening Standard is a pretty big outlet in the UK. It would have been widely seen. And this is at a time when Bill Gates is trying to rebrand after the efforts in the late 90s to have him taken down for having created a monopoly with Microsoft and the antitrust legislation, and trying to rebrand as a philanthropist, because the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, created in the year 2000. The same year that he attends Bill Clinton's White House conference on the new economy and all of this stuff. And, the Clinton Foundation follows a year later. The Gates and Clinton Foundation, I point out in the article, have a long history of collaborating together. Gates openly talked with Epstein about him getting involved in his foundation. We know that Epstein and the Maxwells were involved in the Clinton Foundation, stuff like that. So there's definitely stuff going on there before 2001. And then you have the Isabel Maxwell connection documented in a 2000 article. I mean, Isabel Maxwell openly, the quote's super weird. I'm sure you read it. In the article, where Isabel Maxwell talks about how she persuaded Bill Gates to make a personal investment in Comtech, the Israeli intelligence front company, which appears to have been done through one of the vehicles of the Gates Foundation itself, which is pretty scandalous. But when she talks about Bill Gates, Isabel Maxwell, who's kind of a weird lady if you watch her interviews, but she almost always talks in a British accent, because the Maxwells are, most of them were raised, at least most of the time, in Britain. She adopts a fake Southern Belle accent, Southern, American Southern accent, which I went through every interview this woman's ever done, and she's never done that. And then the Guardian journalist says she starts purring when she talks about Bill Gates.
Purring, yeah. It was a very bizarre thing. Just to kind of go back a little bit, I do want to just make people realize that, first of all, the Wexner thing, very publicly known. A lot of people fought back on the Trump thing, even with Filthy Rich being in there and the old articles. Finally, the dam broke on that one. The Gates thing, kind of known, kind of came out. I think that this article can break that dam. And on top of that, you really did focus in on the Clinton connections, the Clinton initiative. You also discussed how the lawyers of Epstein said Epstein basically helped create the Clinton initiative.
The Clinton Global Initiative. He did.
Yes.
And this was part of a whole effort to recreate philanthropy in the year 2000, to basically hide private business investments or oligarch strategic, impact investments. As disguise them as philanthropy and basically eliminate philanthropy, the term as we imagine it, and replace it with that. And the advocates of that, it notes at the time when the Clinton Foundation and the Gates Foundation were being criticized, that model promoted by the World Economic Forum and the Milken Institute. And the Milken Institute's very interesting because, of course, that's Michael Milken. You may know him as the junk bond king of the 1980s, as he's called, an obvious Wall Street criminal who got off really light despite being charged with 90 felonies for fraud and racketeering and stuff. But the bank he ran, Drexel Burnham Lambert, is also where other bankers tied to Epstein worked as well, like Leon Black. That's where he made all of his money. Or Ron Perlman of Revlon, who hosted Epstein at his 1995 fundraiser for Clinton, has a lot of very sus ties to Clinton presidential era corruption as well, are probably two of the most famous alumni of Drexel Burnham Lambert after Milken. Milken, of course, rebranded as a quote unquote philanthropist. Most of his philanthropy, quote unquote, is used to subsidize and finance illegal settlements in occupied Palestine and, friends of the IDF and all of this stuff. So if you want to call that philanthropy,
Well, let's talk about it for a second, because I think it's important because people don't get it. These tax-free foundations are basically used as a way to funnel those investments, but then have zero accountability because they don't have to pay taxes on any of the profits. And then and
it's money laundering. By the way, Leon Black, who's tied up with Michael Milken and obviously part of this, his family foundation for years was managed by Epstein, who was also managing Wexner's foundation, among other stuff. Epstein appears to have been really key to this whole billionaire philanthropy racket. That's why it's come out now. Bill Gates thought Epstein was his ticket to a Nobel Prize, and Epstein was capable of securing Gates a meeting with the head of the Nobel Prize committee. You don't just do that unless you have key connections here. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that Epstein wasn't, especially after his first arrest, obviously couldn't do sex blackmail anymore. He moved on to other stuff that I think he did the whole time when he was involved in the sex trafficking stuff in the 90s, which involves a lot of shady shadow banking, later money laundering and stuff like that. But also efforts to compromise Silicon Valley through what I would say electronic forms of blackmail, these backdoor tech stuff. If you can compromise the top executives at companies like Microsoft and get a backdoor into all of their stuff, for example, do you really need to compromise people with children? I mean, not everyone is a crazed sex addict or pedophile. But if you can compromise everyone's communication, you can get dirt on pretty much everyone. For much cheaper. So I think it's pretty clear that, things moved in that direction over time. And obviously Israeli intelligence and also the CIA were very focused on tech fueled espionage. Promise is an obvious indicator of that going on in the 1980s. But arguably it goes, back to Vietnam when, the origins of the internet were taking shape the precursor to the internet, ARPANET, which was a military project. Mm-hmm.
So that's good. I'm so glad that you said that, because I think that's a good transition to what I want to talk about other than your article. I think that everybody should go check this out.
There's a lot more in there than we discuss. I do want to point out, but it's pretty clear that this is a big scandal for Microsoft as a company, and it really needs to be about that and not about Gates. And Melinda's whole deal here, I think, is to get out in front of the story, mainly to salvage the Gates Foundation's reputation. Keep in mind that this Bill and Melinda don't have to split it all. There's a third trustee at the Gates Foundation, and it's Warren Buffett. So we could see, Berkshire Hathaway or Warren Buffett directly manage some of this stuff and step in for Gates if things get too hot, I guess you could say, for him. So, this is about keeping the foundation's other projects, which include so much of this techno-fascist world they're trying to implement in the fields of education and genetic engineering, medicine, the new food system they want to create, and all these, fake meats and all of this stuff. They're intimately involved in all of that in smart city stuff. So they obviously need to keep it together. And the same is true for Microsoft. Microsoft is a key player in ID 2020, the Vaccine Credential Initiative, which is the backbone of the vaccine passports they're rolling out and all of this stuff. Microsoft can't afford a scandal to come out as having been heavily compromised by an intelligence service that traffics and abuses children at this point in time. Because I don't know if I mentioned this in the article, but in January of this year, before the annual Davos meeting, Klaus Schwab himself talks about how the year is going to go and all of this stuff. And he says, this is the year that we need to rebuild public trust, that their whole agenda will fail unless they rebuild public trust. And obviously for this to come out and target Microsoft now, no one's ever going to fucking trust Microsoft. They shouldn't either, for obvious reasons, and not just including this article, but more than that. But I think it's pretty clear that, this is about manipulating public perception of these entities. And if Gates has to be the fall guy, just like Epstein had to be the fall guy for the bigger op, they'll do that. They'll take them. They may, allow it to be open season on Gates, but it's not going to be open season on the agenda. It's not going to be open. That's still marching forward through the stuff Gates set up, which is, the Gates Foundation in Microsoft, and also his mysterious third company that apparently doesn't exist anymore, BGC3, that was involved in neurotechnology and this brain-machine interface crap and all of that.
And the brain-machine interface, guys, is DARPA. It is what has been developed for decade upon decade upon decade. Yep. We're now seeing patents, again, for these things being used under the guise to solve PTSD, where it's going to be your therapist, and it's actually going to give you certain dopamine amounts and different types of reward systems for behavior. And this is supposed to be a good thing. Now, I sent you...
Really quick, I want to tease an article I have coming up from a new contributor, which basically lays out how that transhumanist tech, they are trying... that type of technology they are trying to fit your kids with. This push to virtual school, the roadmap for that has kids hooked up to the hive mind and all of this stuff by 2050, and have kids being the center of reimagining what it means to be human. The UN in March 2021 openly talking about the death of schools forever. I mean, school isn't going to come back if you let them shut it down. I mean, that's pretty much how this is. So I really hope parents start to get savvy to this agenda. So that's something to look for in the next couple of days on Unlimited Hangout.
Well, I'm glad you're talking about that. So I just couldn't help but bring up this document. Now, I'm not sure if you've seen this. I've sent it to you, but it's way back. It's from 2001, and it's from Dennis Bushnell, the chief scientist over at NASA still. And this is a collaboration with DARPA and all these other units. And just because you brought up the school thing, I think that we definitely have to talk about this. Number one, they had predicted then that the IT age ends in 2020 and the bio-nano age begins in 2020, just when a bunch of people got injected with what? Bio-nanotech. Now, this is, if you go right up to the top, this is future strategic issues, future warfare for 2025. Now, you talked about the schools. Well, that's openly in here. So telecommuting, shopping, entertainment, travel, education, medicine, commerce, politics, especially, and socialization. So, you're never going to be able to go confront your city councilman again if they get their way. They're strategic. They're strategically.
That's the whole point. That's the whole point. And this article that's going to be out on my site from a new contributor, I really am afraid I'm going to butcher his last name. He's such a nice guy, so I don't want to do that. But I think it's John Klizek. Anyway, he wrote a book called School World Order. That's from Trine Day, which is the same publisher putting out my Epstein book. And he shows that this agenda, at least for teleeducation and having children reimagine what needs to be human, goes back to the 70s, and actually had a fact in there I wasn't aware of, that the term transhumanism was coined by Julian Huxley, who was the first head of UNESCO and also at the time the president of the British Eugenics Society, and said that transhumanism, this merging of, as Klaus Schwab says it, our biological and digital selves, is the next stage of eugenics. He's very open about it. And wow, that's from 1957. I mean, this stuff has been going on for a long time. And a lot of it, of course, has one of the key players here is the Rockefeller family, whose foundation is still intimately involved. Melanie Walker, who we talked about a little bit ago, this intelligence asset initially recruited for Epstein, is a senior fellow at the Rockefeller Foundation. Pretty interesting. But oddly enough, and this didn't get any mainstream media attention, Leon Black, of all people, said that the reason he wanted Epstein to be involved in his family foundation is because David Rockefeller personally appointed Epstein to the board of Rockefeller University. Before this, it was, he was voted on the board. Leon Black is saying David Rockefeller himself knew Epstein and liked him enough to appoint him to the board. Wow.
You know what I would love to see? Now that I had no idea, and I don't believe that was in the article either. I remember the Rockefeller.
No. This is just, that's for my Leon Black chapter in my book, which is going to be pretty interesting.
That is interesting.
Anyway.
So David Rockefeller actually kept like a Dewey Decimal System index file on everybody he met. And a few years ago, maybe 4 years ago, I did a story on it for We Are Change. It was really interesting to see the Henry Kissinger card, and it had the Bilderberg meetings and these different notes, and some people would get more than one card. And one of the reasons that they said that he did this is, I believe he was naval intelligence when he was in the military. A lot of people don't know that about David. So he had this meticulous system. I'd love to see what the card for Jeffrey Epstein says.
I doubt we'll ever see that.
You know what? I'd make that trip to New York. I believe it's in the Rockefeller archives at this point. And that would be a really interesting
the Epstein
story.
one they probably looked for and took out. You know how it is. I mean, seriously, a lot of stuff since I did my original article series in 2019, I've had to save stuff as PDFs. They're scrubbing Epstein stuff from the internet, or attempting to. Specifically, the stuff that I've seen scrubbed the most is actually about Christine Maxwell's company, Gilead.
Well, because those people are still in power. They're still, that's the big thing, is those people are still on these boards. It would horrify people if they were aware that this network, this family that is career intelligence, that obviously worked with a serial pedophile, with at least 2 intelligence agencies and a royal family, all right, at least that is still directing policy in a manner that most people can't comprehend, because Rachel fucking Maddow never talks about it and Tucker Carlson never talks about it. But when you see the elbows that they're rubbing and the things that they're promoting, like you said, things like Palantir, like, you know, I saw that you had a little back and forth there. With what is it? Thiel Capital's
Eric Weinstein.
Yeah.
What a hack that guy is. Did you know his hedge fund, when he made it the intellectual dark web and his theory of everything thing in like 2013, 2014, he was part of a hedge fund called the Natron Group, and they framed it as like, oh, this lowly man is now a well-respected like physicist because he made up this theory that actually doesn't hold water, and he didn't write a paper about it until this year. And it's been totally dismantled by actual scientists. But anyway, at the time, he was a hedge fund manager, and he co-founded that with like one of the main guys at Goldman Sachs in the 90s. And this is supposed to be the guy that cares seriously about Jeffrey Epstein's intelligence ties. By the way, Eric Weinstein met Epstein in 2004, and he's admitted this now, right? But at the time, he was a hedge fund manager when Epstein wanted to meet with him, and he was also a member of EDGE. Okay. And the reason Epstein allegedly wanted to meet with him was foreign currency trading, which was Epstein's, I argue, based on my research, it was basically his term for his shadow banking activities, because he was involved with basically manipulating currencies, which a lot of prominent slimy billionaires like George Soros and others and Joe Lewis have been, well known to have done throughout the 1990s and beyond. So it's interesting that, and then, but when Eric Weinstein came out and talked about it last year, he was like, yeah, I met with Epstein and I knew right away he was a construct, allegedly, but he won't say what he and Epstein talked about. And he won't say what it was about Epstein that made him know it was a construct right away. And why would Eric Weinstein not talk about how Epstein was such an obvious construct when he was arrested the first time? Why did he wait until 2019?
Yeah.
And by the way, Eric Weinstein currently works for Peter Thiel. He's a managing director at Thiel Capital. Thiel Capital is investing in this Orwellian nightmare crap, including brain machine interfaces and all of this stuff that Eric Weinstein claims to rail against. It's complete bullshit. Also, Eric Weinstein, a lot of his argument about Epstein and intelligence is follow the money, which is really ironic when at the same time he's saying that his boss, Peter Thiel, co-invested with Epstein and Carbine 911, along with Ehud Barak. I mean, it's just like, okay, dude, why don't you talk about that? You're going to follow the money there to your boss. And by the way, Palantir, which is like Peter Thiel's main company after PayPal, is an obvious CIA front. It couldn't be more obvious. And it wasn't, this whole thing about these guys and the Thielverse, as I call them, being libertarians is such shit. They are rebranded neocons. Literally the person who helped Peter Thiel set Palantir up was Richard Pearl.
Oh, what was it? The Prince of Darkness himself, right? Richard Pearl?
Yeah. The architect of the Iraq War, the guy that wrote A Clean Break from Netanyahu back in the late 90s and was like, you need to get the U.S. to overthrow Saddam Hussein for you and all of this stuff, and who was involved in a lot of crazy stuff in the Reagan administration too. Like one of the most disgusting neocons of them all, who also mapped out the current Orwellian nightmare in his book back in like 2004, where he talks about the need for like biometric IDs for everyone, and all of this stuff, is the guy that helped Peter Thiel set that up, because Peter Thiel and him were trying to recreate the Total Information Awareness DARPA program that was being run by Iran-Contra criminals like John Poindexter. So that's what Palantir is. Yeah. So it's really ridiculous that Eric Weinstein is claiming to be an advocate against a lot of the stuff that, his boss actively is involved in creating. And, he's managing a big chunk of Thiel's empire at Thiel Capital. So, not acknowledging that, I think, is honestly pretty silly. And also the whole intellectual dark web thing is like, oh, we're, protecting free speech and all of this stuff. I have never once heard where Eric Weinstein say anything about the blatantly unconstitutional anti-BDS laws that are on the books in like over 20 states in the US. Where is all free speech created equal? Apparently not. But he's very, very blatantly pro-Zionist and pro-Israel. So maybe that's why. So I guess there's limits to the free speech advocacy of this particular crowd.
And I just want to tell people, I believe that Abby Martin just won her court case. I think
did?
It was in Georgia. Yeah, she won. And, it was an anti-BDS lawsuit, said it was defamation. She won. It's not getting a lot of media coverage. I hope to get her on in the near future to talk about that. But, you just talked about the Total Information Awareness DARPA program. And one of the things that really caught my eye about this Newsweek article, Inside the Military's Secret Undercover Army, is that they admit that this secret undercover army, which is really an extension of the national security apparatus, largely used with private shell companies for this plausible deniability, where they're able to get into these databases, but also create tools which can stop biometric tracking. So they, the most interesting one I would say is when I scroll down, they have this glove here that looks exactly like a human hand, and you're not going to be able to tell, and it will actually emit a fingerprint that is someone else's or a construct, and actually emit finger oils as they do it. And this is part of their way to circumvent these things. They also have magnetic license plates that won't track back to them.
This is like Minority Report level shit.
Yeah. And they talk about how there's never been, in the 10 years that now it's publicly been in use, one hearing on it. There is absolutely zero oversight. And it's
Duh.
And it's being enacted in the United States. And one of the really interesting things is I caught this from Annie Jacobson, who's obviously done a lot of work on DARPA, Area 51, Paperclip. And in a previous tweet, she goes, boy, it is interesting that the pipe bomber from January 5th knew how to evade all this biometric detection, and we still don't know who that is. So, speak to that, because there are so many tools for pre-crime. It came out later, and I remember we discussed it after the Capitol incident, that largely they had all this information. They had all this identity. Mm-hmm. They had all the social media. They knew who they were going to go after. They didn't need all these snitches to tell on people. Really, that was just more source to run profiles on who would tell on others.
Yeah. Well, so there's a couple different angles to the pre-crime stuff going on now, and one key part, I'm glad you brought it up, is social media. We mentioned this. I mentioned this to you before we went live, Jason. But DHS just a couple days ago formally announced that they are going live with their pre-crime program. They have a new center set up, and every state has to give it at least $77 million a year minimum. And they're going live with this now as a way to stop domestic terrorism right after, they issued this directive, whatever it was, where they were like, get ready for a wave of domestic terror attacks in the U.S. now that COVID's gone and all of this stuff. How convenient, right? But one of the key things, and they mentioned this in the press release about this new pre-crime center, is social media. So, I honestly want people to really consider if they need to be on conventional social media anymore. If you want to follow the work of people like me and Jason, make a new burner account on Twitter or something and follow us, but don't like our stuff, don't comment because they're trying to data mine this to have you basically criminalize yourself, and they're going to be moving the goalposts, and that's basically the fuel. Social media is the fuel in a lot of ways for this war on domestic terror. And so there's different ways to follow people like me and Jason. The Rockfin is one example. You can comment and stuff there. And I don't think it's being scraped in the same way that Facebook and Twitter are at the current moment. And obviously Facebook and Twitter are hugely complicit in this whole operation and should be treated as such and should suffer the consequences, not just for this, but also their egregious censorship of content, which of course they move the goalposts on that now in a big way. A lot of things that were conspiracy supposedly last year and you could get censored or deleted for are now fine, including talking about, the Wuhan P4 lab and all of this stuff, among other things, is now fine. Even Fauci's talking about it.
Facebook
wow,
announced today. Did you hear? Facebook said it's now okay to speculate that it could come. It's a man-made virus. They won't delete those posts. Thank you so much, Facebook. You guys have been so fair throughout this. I mean, it's insanity. They censor reality, control narratives, and then criminalize you for questioning their narratives with actual evidence. I mean, we saw, for instance, the Facebook whistleblowers come out and say that they were not only de-algoing, delisting people, but outright censoring people that had actual evidence. Why? Because it was creating quote-unquote vaccine hesitancy. Not that the information was incorrect.
Yeah, well, that happened to me on Patreon. I got demonetized completely for that. But people, especially Facebook, need to get off of Facebook now. Facebook is much more than a social media network. You may not have heard of it, but they've been buying things up like Oculus Rift, among other things. By the way, the Oculus Rift founder, Palmer Luckey, now runs Anduril, which is making AI weapons for the military and is backed by Peter Thiel, another Thielverse goon, who's also tied up with Facebook. And by the way, Peter Thiel was the first outside investor in Facebook. It basically allowed Facebook to become a viable company and become what it is today. So Peter Thiel, once again, but Facebook right now, and they think they'll have it ready in a year or two, potentially, are creating a wearable that can literally read your nerve signals.
Oh, lovely.
So you wear it on your hand and you think about typing and it knows what you're trying to type, and they claim it can't read your brain, just the nerve signals going from your brain to your hand. I mean, if you want to believe that shit, I don't know. Keep drinking the Kool-Aid, people. Just believe Zuckerberg. Like, he's such a trustworthy guy that doesn't look like, a freaking like robot hell creature that puts too much sunscreen on his face.
Robot hell creature, anyway. Whitney. How dare you?
Oh, I know. I'm so mean. I don't know.
I did some cyberbullying.
Such an asshole oligarch. I don't know.
No, listen. You're absolutely right. Again, they're making these interface, and that's the. You know what? I'm glad you brought that up because that's the big scam.
But they're going to tie that into Facebook, right? Like, sure. If you want to be on Facebook now, you have to wear a wearable and you have to use our central bank-backed stable coin and all this stuff they're setting up. Mm-hmm. Facebook is trying to become a marketplace, just like they're doing in Russia, where they have their biggest bank being like Sberbank, setting up this whole ecosystem with digital ID and their central bank-backed digital currency, which is through the private bank, but that bank is backed and partially owned by the Russian government. So,
lovely.
It's basically that. Facebook is basically trying to be that for the US in a big way. And so the longer you're on that platform, the more money you are giving them and you're letting them build this stuff. And by the way, Facebook's ties to DARPA are very long and persistent, going back to their origins and the fact that a lot of this other stuff of Facebook you may not see on the public face of the Facebook interface was created by a woman named Regina Dugan, who used to be head of a major, I don't think if she wasn't head of DARPA, she was head of a major part of DARPA, and she was hired by Facebook to run their Building 8 center that was creating a bunch of this tech stuff and has been phased into other things now. It's not called Building 8 anymore. It's been merged into other stuff. Still operating at Facebook, but I mean, it's basically a front for military intelligence at this point, Facebook, and you should divest from them. You can still be on Twitter if you want. I don't know. I honestly think you should put your clicks and attention on stuff that's alternative and doesn't manipulate your feeds and all of this stuff. Another thing Facebook has done on the record, by the way, is study how to manipulate users' emotions based on their news feeds, make people more depressed, make people feel more isolated, and all of the stuff. They're experimenting on you. Get the fuck off of Facebook. You don't need it. And in my case, I couldn't delete my profile. I got locked out, but fuck it, I'm not going to log back in. Just leave it there. If you have problems deleting it or whatever, just stop using it. You don't need to use it.
I mean, I only use mine to post news and to advertise for this. It's on none of my phones.
Well, it's different when you're a content creator.
Sure.
No,
but
I'm talking about
no personal
regular
stuff.
People.
No personal stuff. I don't check in anywhere. I don't post pictures of me and my family. Every once in a while someone tags me in that, but I'm 100% with you, and it's not on these. It's not on my devices. You can't take it off, a lot of them. Some of you have to disable it. I mean, you can do that through Graphene and Lineage OS and all that other stuff. But I think you're absolutely right. And I think that people have to understand that this thing is what's known as a Trojan Horse, or a civilian system, in that same document that I was showing.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. And absolutely. Facebook is that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they were talking about what's inexpensive: information, internet, and psychological warfare. And, this is inside the continental United States. Again, they put this on paper, that this was the future of warfare 20 years ago.
Speaking of that, let's go to PNAC, Project for a New American Century.
Yes.
Everyone's favorite PNAC document, Rebuilding America's Defenses, from September 2000, which, as I'm sure you know, Jason, is very good at predicting the future. Anyway, a part that gets forgotten there a lot is the call for Space Force, the call to militarize space through the creation of a new Space Force. This is back in 2000. Oh, Trump the nationalist, not a neocon at all, is making Space Force. Hooray. Oh, yeah. Okay. No, it was the PNAC neocons idea, and it still is. Creating the complete militarization of space, making space the final frontier of warfare, along with information warfare on the internet. Those are the two things they map out in there, and what to do. And so a lot of this stuff, including this Newsweek article, and a lot of that is the logical extension of that over time, alongside their private sector partners that were created by the intelligence community anyway, like Palantir and Facebook. If you're not aware of the ties of Facebook to that, I mean, Palantir's are really blatant. But Facebook is a little more, you have to look at the pieces more. I wrote a piece recently called The Military Origins of Facebook. You can go basically see how it was created to be a resurrected version of a DARPA's program LifeLog that never quite got off the ground. It's essentially the same thing. And, Peter Thiel, as he's trying to recreate total information awareness, LifeLog was part of the Information Awareness Office. He goes, after being contacted by Sean Parker, chosen to be one of Facebook's first presidents, who was recruited by the CIA at 16.
And a Bilderberg member.
About that.
And a Bilderberg member.
And an Edge member. He likes to hang out at Edge. Which, by the way, we talked about Edge earlier. I forgot to say, Edge from 2001 to 2017 was almost entirely funded by Jeffrey Epstein. The vast majority of its funds came from there most years. Epstein was its only donor. And the year that Epstein stops donating to Edge is the year they stop having their billionaires dinner events where Epstein would go hang out with the Silicon Valley high rollers, including not just top people at Microsoft, top people at Google, Jeff Bezos, who, by the way, Ghislaine Maxwell liked to brag about how close they were with Jeff Bezos. That's been covered up. Did you know that Jeff Bezos and Jeffrey Epstein were both in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia? Remember, Jeffrey Epstein was best friends with Mohammed bin Salman on the eve of the 2016 election?
I remember. Hey, wait a minute.
I wonder what they were doing, hanging out there.
Didn't Epstein, have that weird Saudi Arabian passport with a fake identification?
Yeah, but that's back in the
I know, back in the 80s. But again, that's
way before Mohammed bin Salman.
Yeah. But it just shows, again, these ties are international. They seem to always come up with that same kind of Saudi, Israeli, Euro-American alliance that we've seen really throughout the driving force of this agenda. You were talking about before, a guy like Richard Pearl, also very involved in Iran-Contra. And then
Mm-hmm.
all these guys and then their white papers just keep coming into fruition.
Yeah, the neocons are still in power. I mean, neoliberals, neocons, I mean, it's the same shit. I mean, just look at someone like Victoria Nuland, who's a neoliberal. Her husband is Bob Kagan, a PNAC neocon. So, okay, neoconservative, neoliberal, one's in the Democratic Party, one's in the Republican Party. Come on, it's the same fucking cabal, that's been running the whole show this whole time. And, as I point out in my Gates article, they've compromised Microsoft apparently in a huge way. What other companies have they done this to? Probably a lot.
Well, all right, good.
They've never been held accountable. I mean, come on. And basically all of Silicon Valley as it exists today was set up by entities or directly by the intelligence community. So, I mean, we need to stop acting like Silicon Valley was like, oh, they were just in their garages and made these great companies that we use now. And they're private sector entities and the public sector can't tell them what to do. Yeah, well, the public sector made this stuff through their black budgets and all of this shit. So it's the same freaking blob. The Silicon Valley and the military and intelligence communities have openly fused now. And that's why a lot of these companies are contractors for intelligence or contractors for the military. It's come full circle. And we need to stop acting like, oh, we can't do anything about it because it's the private sector. Really? I mean, come on, maybe take some of their contracts away as a starting point. But I mean, that's never going to be a real discussion.
Well, again, I just want to reiterate, this is our money. These are our black budgets. Again, in the document, it tells you inputs and new procurement decisions, 15 plus years to produce. That's technology. 40 plus years in inventory. And then it discusses when they start to roll this stuff out. Now, that kind of brings me back to billionaire frontmen and human brain interfaces. Now, you discussed a technology that's wrist wearable and is going to read the nerves so it can figure out how it's typing.
Facebook's. Amazon has one out now that reads your emotions, they say.
I've seen it, yes. So DARPA openly has a human brain interface where a soldier can wear a cap and then think about commanding drones. I'm not sure if you've ever covered this.
Yeah. I mean, this is in military documents going a long time back. Yeah, sure.
And they've kind of rolled it out. And to me, that tells me that these human brain interfaces absolutely do not have to be implanted in our bodies to work. However...
Oh, yeah. There's a whole DARPA program about that called N3, which is about basically injecting the body with magnetic particles and using some sort of soft electromagnetic manipulation to basically do the same thing, to read and write onto the human brain, according to DARPA. You can figure out what that means.
However, the big push, not only to just inject, but is for somebody like Musk to promote Neuralink and say, oh, you're going to come to a kiosk. We're going to pop it into your head. You're going to hear music without your earbuds. How cool is that going to be?
Hey, well, there's an Israeli company that can already openly talks about beaming music into your head without headphones and without a brain machine interface. So like you're saying, this can happen without any sort of invasive thing. But I'm happy to talk about Elon Musk for a second. Did you know that Jeffrey Epstein toured SpaceX's facilities back in 2012? Oh, isn't that interesting? Did you know that one of these girls that was part of his, sort of these Melanie Walker, Nicole Younkerman style girls was set up with Kimball Musk, and that's how he got into SpaceX and all of this stuff. Did you know that SpaceX was set up in 2002, the same year that the precursor to SpaceX, Bill Gates's Teledesic, shut down? Elon Musk, the cool rogue billionaire.
He's a wild card, Whitney. He's on SNL. He's hip. He's with it.
No. I'll tell you something about Elon Musk to explain it. Maybe this will help people make sense of his behavior. Elon Musk is a narcissist who desperately wants the Bitcoin plebs and stuff on the internet to think he is cool because he thinks they are cool. He desperately wants them to think they are cool, but he also is basically, tied up with this same intelligence cabal. He used to go to these edge dinners. He met Epstein. He apparently introduced Mark Zuckerberg to Epstein. And when he came out a couple years ago and was like, Saudi, I'm going to take Tesla private, and it's going to be with Saudi Arabia's money. Remember how Epstein had all those pictures of MBS in his house and talked about how close he was to Mohammed bin Salman all the time, and that Mohammed bin Salman was going to invest in Tesla? Well, it came out after Epstein's death that, yes, in fact, Epstein was the go-between there. So Tesla was using Epstein to try and get money, just like Bill Gates and a bunch of these other guys. So, I mean, come on. He obviously has the connections to the same whole cabal that helped him set up SpaceX and all of the stuff. Elon Musk's empire would not exist without literally billions of dollars in government subsidies over multiple administrations. That doesn't happen to you unless you're running front companies. And a bunch of his stuff can't turn profits, and a lot of their products spontaneously burst into flames. So come on, free market capitalism, womp, womp, womp. Okay, that's not Elon Musk.
Well, it goes back to what we were talking about like 40 minutes ago in the beginning of this, when we were talking about Comtech and the Maxwell's front companies and the fact that they weren't turning a profit. And how is it?
4 million in losses, and then Paul Allen's like, let me give you a boatload of cash for no reason. By the way, Paul Allen was part of that social network that included Lynn Forrester de Rothschild, close Epstein associate, Naomi Campbell, we've all seen the pictures of Virginia Giuffre, and Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein, and Naomi Campbell. And he was part of this elite social club with them. And do you know who it was called A Small World? The top shareholder in A Small World was, you ready for this? Harvey Weinstein.
Oh, he's a good guy. I like Harv. I mean, he's never done anything wrong with me.
So that's the other co-founder of Microsoft besides Bill Gates. And then Paul, around the same time he's part of A Small World, photographed hanging out with Nicole Junkerman herself.
And this is the gentleman that also, I believe, co-wrote, what was it, Bill Gates' first biography?
No, that was Nathan Myhrvold.
Oh, Myhrvold, okay.
In 1996, the one that Alan Dershowitz himself says was a child rapist.
Lovely.
Take it from one child rapist that the other guy's a child rapist. I'd believe Alan Dershowitz on that point. That's probably about it, though.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, Whitney, we've had you for an hour. It's always, I love it when you cut time out. It's always, kind of on the fly, but I always love your work. And this is an article that people need to read, especially if they haven't dug deep down rabbit holes outside of Epstein, because maybe this will get people into the conversation about business frontmen like Elon Musk, like Jeff Bezos. Again, it's so weird.
They're all frontmen. I mean, come on.
Well, they're not making money for so long.
If you guys think these are really the richest people in the world and they run everything, they're beholden to other people.
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time.
Uh-huh.
You don't get in the rocket business with NASA. Both of them are. Okay, you don't get into that rocket business and space business.
Okay. Going back to SpaceX, it wasn't until like a couple months ago they finally had a rocket that didn't explode.
Exactly.
But somehow NASA's like, have all these contracts, and Space Force is like, be our main contractor. Okay. And also the other thing, Starlink is about creating a global internet service provider monopoly. This was Bill Gates's plan in the 90s, and he couldn't afford to do it at the time. So he closed down in 2002. And that's when Elon Musk, right after PayPal is sold and Peter Thiel goes to remake Total Information Awareness and Palantir and all this stuff. The other half, Elon Musk's, goes and makes SpaceX and starts down this trajectory. I mean, if you're NASA and Space Force and you're like, oh, the guy that can't make things that can't stop exploding, I'm going to hire him. I mean, come on.
And you talked about Starlink. At the same time that Starlink goes up, DARPA's version of Starlink goes up with the military.
Wow.
SpaceX.
Actually, that's a really good find. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And they bragged about it. They bragged about it. Like, this is last year I covered it. And it's so in your face that these are frontmen. Again, they're people that didn't make money without forced government subsidies for literally like a decade each. And then all of a sudden, they're the richest, coolest people, and they're involved in a space program that literally was born at the same time DARPA was born, and which we know very little to nothing about because there's never been transparency. Well, somebody who smashes through these walls of lies is, of course, Whitney Webb. UnlimitedHangout.com, Rockfin.com. How else can people support you? I don't want to put you on the spot, but when can people pre-order the book? That's the real big question.
You can pre-order the book now, but because of what happened with Chile and how I couldn't get childcare, including most of last year, because this was going on since March 2020, it was really stressful because until Chile reopened its borders, my boyfriend couldn't come to Chile. So I was doing the single mom thing, basically with no childcare and trying to work full time. It was madness. So now It's going to be coming out in early 2022, but you can pre-order it right now on Amazon if you'd like, or you can wait a little later. And then it's also going to be released on an audiobook as well for those that are interested. So beyond the book stuff, you can follow my work. I really recommend right now, especially if you followed my advice to get off of Twitter and Facebook. I have no Facebook presence anymore. My author page I abandoned in like 2017 anyway. But follow me on Telegram. Unlimited Hangout has a Telegram channel. We have about 4,000 subscribers, and there's a chat room and all of this stuff. You're welcome to use that. I'm not very active on Twitter anymore anyway, just because some of the stuff I was getting on there was really extreme. I even had people like sign up to my Patreon just to send me death threats and stuff. And so Twitter was getting really crazy. And once you break 100,000 followers and do this kind of work, it stops being fun to engage with people. So, definitely consider following me on Telegram. But if you look at my Twitter bio, there's a link tree there, and all the different links where you can follow my work are available there. Of course, I have a Rockfin channel. I had to sort of pause my podcast this month because I was feeling really ill, like I said earlier. So I couldn't really do a lot of audio visual stuff just because I didn't sound very well and I didn't look very well, obviously. So I'm hoping to start that back up again pretty soon. But that's where I host my podcast, so you can find that stuff there. And then Johnny and I will be starting up our Dump Davos World Economic Forum Takedown video series again here in a week or two. So hopefully that will go on. And then I had to pause this month, but I also contribute regularly to The Last American Vagabond. So that's another way you can support my work, is just by supporting TLAV. If you also enjoy Ryan's work and Derek Rose's work and the other people that contribute there, you can just contribute, and support all of our works by contributing there as well. And of course, he's also on Rockfin. And as I'm sure your viewers know, if you subscribe to one channel on Rockfin, you get all the premium content. So Ryan and Derek are both there as well. As am I, as are you. So, that's one option for some people, but I know not everyone wants to use Rockfin. So on my website, Unlimited Hangout, you can go to the Support Us tab. And if you're not interested in subscribing to my content that way, or to the podcast that's on Rockfin, you can access that stuff through a monthly subscription there. You can pay by PayPal or credit card, whatever, all the other options are available. I had to set that up after I got deplatformed from Patreon, because I like having, some options, because not everyone wants to, sign up for the free account. Not everyone likes the Rockfin stuff. It's okay. It's obviously your preference. So I think that's that's pretty much the spiel. But like I said, there's going to be some cool new contributors coming to write for Unlimited Hangout soon. So definitely make sure to check it out a little more regularly in the near future. And by the end of the week, that big education UNESCO plan for, transhumanist education for your child. Seriously, by the end of it, my mouth was agape. I learned stuff. I mean, if people think my reporting is information dense, wait till you get a load of this guy.
So, you know what? Actually, I have it up here. I might as well leave with this just so people understand how twisted this is. When we say, and to me, this is what this whole transgender movement is. It's not like an extension of LGBTQ, LMNOPO. It's that they're trying to get you to believe that you can be something other than human. And when we talk about this is in New York schools right now. It's the genderbread person. And, this is a person whose gender identity and gender expression and biological sex and attractions are there for little kids to see. It's kind of weird for me that they have the, multicolored brain, but then the sex thing, which is no longer male or female, it has that extra deal, is where genitals would be. And kind of hanging out as almost like a phallus.
Well, the sexualization of children, the hypersexualization of children has been going on for a really long time. And people that have been paying attention to like Hollywood and pop culture and stuff have seen the writing on the wall there for a long time. But honestly, I think this particular agenda is about taking away parental rights over the bodily autonomy of their children when they're too young to consent. And we're seeing that with the vaccine now. So it's obviously not something necessarily exclusive to what's going on with transgender
Well,
issues
I'd say
in the
this,
US.
Whitney.
It's obviously they basically want the state to be able to manipulate children without parental consent into consenting to interventions that have effects on their body and health they can't understand when they're really young, obviously. And that's why a lot of this now with this, what you were talking about earlier in Ontario, where kids don't even have to have parental consent to get the vaccine, it's just the ice cream stuff.
And that's how they slipped
it's the
it
same
in.
Sort of stuff.
They slipped it in through this gender identity stuff. You look at Dan Dixon, Press for Truth, and they kind of established this law through kids that had one parent that was divorced and was getting behind this transitional surgery when they were 12, 13 years old. And that's how they passed these laws that they could have autonomy over their own body. And then they extended it to the vaccines as well. So that's kind of my fear, is that they're confusing these kids. They're getting them to think that, they can be this, that, they're a boy, they're a girl, they're a non-binary, they're anything. Give them that medical autonomy and then bring in the vaccines.
There's just also this transhumanist push, like I was talking about in schools, to get kids to identify more with like a virtual avatar than themselves. Because they're like in the virtual schoolroom and then the virtual them and all of this stuff. You can be anything you want in the virtual world, right? And it's sort of this escapist version of life, I guess you could say, being sold to children. But going back to transgender issues, I just want to say that my best friend in elementary school was transgender. When I lived in the States, my roommate was transgender. I know that a lot of people suffered immensely because of that dysphoria and their identities. But what's going on now, a lot of it is obviously been hijacked for a particular agenda. It's really hard not to see that. But I think at the same time we have these conversations, it's important to acknowledge that there are people that have legitimate, needs in that sphere. But a lot of times, they're consistent about it. They express it, even when transgender was not like a common thing, obviously, like when I was in school. They were very clear about how they felt they were and maintained that for decades. Unfortunately, the way this has been promoted now, you have kids that just feel like they don't fit in, or they want to feel cool, and they're told that they can be cool or they'll feel better if they consent to this stuff, or that the reason they feel like they don't fit in is this. And maybe that is true for some kids, but it's certainly not true for all kids that feel that way. And so it's definitely being hijacked for various stuff. And like we talked about, I think it has to do with this effort to take parents out of the equation when it comes to interventions on children's bodies and their health, whether it's injections in the form of a vaccine or puberty blockers and all of this stuff. It's definitely stuff that can have a long-lasting impact for children's health, and taking parents out of the equation is very dangerous. And in my opinion, points towards the state making efforts to replace parents altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said this virtual avatar, that's the final step in this. They don't know how long the bio-nano era lasts in their own white papers. They say starts in 2020. We don't know when we'll get there, but afterwards it is a virtual era, and that's what I've been saying.
This is Matrix level stuff,
Yeah, absolutely.
You're plugged into the Klaus Schwab hive mind, and you only exist as a virtual avatar, basically. That's how they're trying to create this. It's really wild. And I'm just amazed that more people are unwilling to push back against this stuff. So many people are scared to talk about the Great Reset in the World Economic Forum still, including in alternative media, but there's so much going on you can't explain if you refuse to acknowledge that. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of alternative media regularly covers election manipulation by the West and other countries and all of this stuff. But a lot of that is happening because of the Fourth Industrial Revolution and the raw materials there. If you deny that the Fourth Industrial Revolution is happening and this push to autonomy and electric whatever and all this different tech stuff is happening, you can't really explain why all of these countries are being meddled in. The thing they have in common are resources critical to that coming, a revolution that we're supposedly in the full swing of. But it only happens if we consent to it. I really want to stress that.
I absolutely agree. Whitney Webb, open invitation anytime. Please send me the new article once it comes out. Obviously, we'll promote it here, and we'd love to have you back.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll see what I can do. But I'm hoping to be on with Ryan, by the way, for The Last American Vagabond at some point today. But of course, I'm in a weird time zone for doing interviews with the U.S., so not everyone gets up as early as you, Jason. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
But if that doesn't work out, I will be on a panel tonight for the Greater Reset, which is Derek Brose's thing. I'll be there with Ryan of T-Lab and Derek as well. And hopefully, if not T-Lab today, I'll be on tomorrow for people that are looking for more, I guess, this week, since I have been kind of off the radar for a little bit.
Well,
so thanks again, Jason.
Thank you, and my audience thanks you. Whitney Webb, you rock, and I'll be tuning into the Greater Reset tonight, okay?
Okay, awesome. We'll see you then.
All right, later on. And that's Whitney Webb, everybody. I do want to read off some of the tips that came in from Rockfin, as I love your support, guys, and without you, I wouldn't be able to do this. Whitney Webb kills it. Kim Musser says, I don't even need to hear it, so to start it off with this beautiful day and say thanks to you both. Just saw Iowa governor on a panel with Hannity. She is wonderful. Good move. Take care. Jim Garrison says, here's a 5-spot. Whitney rocks. Thank you. Tom Detmore, thank you so much. Says, keep sharing the truth. Torinator says, hard-hidden news here on the Rockfin. Jason, you need to listen to Unraveled, the Long Island Serial Killer. It's another podcast from Investigation Discovery. Ooh. Primary suspect, the police chief at the time. Interesting. And then Vince, thank you so much for that tip. Guys, thank you so much for the support. If you do want to support me, you can become a premium subscriber here at Rockfin. You get all of the premium stuff from Whitney Webb, T-Lab, Derek Bros, Graham Elwood, Slow News Day, so many others, okay? Sam Tripoli's on here, Ben Askren, John Fitch. So many different flavors. Again, Rockfin, Rockfin, Rockfin. Great way to support me. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you on the flip.